Hello everybody, well this is exciting. I don't normally make a lot of vlogs or informal language videos, so here I am. My name is Kirsten and I write fluentlanguage.co.uk and I teach some German on the internet and I've made a few online courses. I have been tagged in language tag by my good friend and podcast co-host Lindsay Dow. And here I am, and I am supposed to answer 11 questions. So I'm just going to try and power through these and tell you a little bit about my own language learning background. So question number 1, what do you consider to be your native language? I only have one native language, and that is German. There is no other native language. Question number 2, what was your first language learning experience? I guess any language interaction is a way of learning. So the first time I remember using a foreign language was when I went to primary school and I was 6 years old, and we did this little dance and we sang a song and it was in Hebrew. And I don't really remember much about it. I know it was not Shalom Chaverim, even though I learned that later. So if anyone knows a little Hebrew children's song about a fox in a circle, please, beat me and tell me about it, because I'd love to remember this as more than just a fragment. But that was certainly my first foreign language experience. Number 3, what languages have you studied and why did you start them? English, French, Italian, Latin, Spanish. Those were all during my secondary school years. English was compulsory. French was a compulsory second language that my school gave me the choice of French or Latin, and at the time I went, oh, Latin's dead, I don't know how to learn dead language, so I learned French. Then 1 year later, I got the chance to take afternoon lessons in Italian, and I was like, yeah, by then I was just, any language that they would give me, I would take, so, excuse me, I took Italian. When I took Latin, the thinking behind it was, it's still a dead language, but in the German university system, certain degree courses, at the time at least, required you to have this thing called the Latinum, which is a proof that you know a little bit of Latin, or you've done 3 years of Latin. So I took Latin. And I actually really, really loved Latin. And then after school, I trained to become a multilingual secretary, and that course had compulsory Spanish, so I also took Spanish. After this sort of 10-year burst of just picking up lots of European languages, I kind of, I moved to England and went to university and didn't really add a lot of new languages. And recently, since I've started becoming self-employed and teaching German, I did a lot of travelling before in my job. So I did a lot of learning the absolute essentials, the sort of thank you, please, I don't understand, in Turkish, in Chinese, and always I don't eat meat. Even in Estonian, so wherever I went I picked up a bit. But the language I kind of got more interested in and took seriously after that was Russian. And I've recently kind of abandoned Russian a little bit and started getting into something that's fascinated me for ages, which is Welsh. So at the moment I would consider myself a Welsh learner. So long story short, I have studied English, French, Spanish, Latin, Italian, Welsh, Russian. 7 foreign languages, approximately, with some bits and bobs of others. How does your personality affect how you learn languages? I'm very extroverted. I love talking to people. I love hearing people talk, and I'm not a very good oral processor, so maybe this is to do with being an extrovert and just processing information by just waffling on, which kind of means, because I'm so outgoing, I'm not a great listener. So the way I learn languages is I pick up a lot in interaction with people, and I am very comfortable making a fool out of myself, but at the same time I'm very thorough. I like having my things in order, so the other aspect of my personality does affect how I learn languages, because I do like following a structured approach, and I need to always have a clear course and a notebook, and write by hand. Do you prefer learning languages in a class or individually? In a class. What are your favourite language learning materials? I like this series called 10 Minutes a Day books. I really enjoy those. This is because I haven't taught myself a language really individually except in the last few years. It's difficult to say. Textbooks, really. Textbooks, videos. I love a good soap opera. My favourite language teaching materials are books by the Huber publishing house, which is Hueber, and Deutsche Welle. For teaching German, so I really love those, so I'll just tell you about my teaching materials. How much time do you spend actively learning per day or per week? Not as much as Lindsay and Shannon. During the day I do a lot of sort of small maintenance things, such as the IGLC, hashtag IGLC on Instagram. I listen to podcasts in French mostly to always keep my French current, and I guess I speak a foreign language all day long. Perhaps it adds up to 3 hours a week. What are your short-term and long-term language learning goals? My short-term language learning goal is to go to Wales and speak some Welsh to people. Maybe I should make my language learning goal to go and visit Simon from Omniglot, who I know lives in Wales. Also visit my good friend Mererid, who teaches Welsh in Wales. So I'm sure these people would be very glad to have me try out all my terrible Welsh on them. So no real goal except to work through Say Something in Welsh and stick with it and not get bored. My long-term language learning goal would be to maintain my fluency levels in English, German and French. My long-term goal would be that I could consider myself fluent in 5 languages. That would be awesome. Okay, what is your favourite language? My favourite language is the secret cutesy loving language I've made up with my husband that I'm not going to tell you about. Also Dothraki, pretty cool. What is the next language you want to learn? Welsh. I've only just started. What advice can you give to new language learners? To boil it down to one piece is, don't get too hung up on goals. As you can tell, I've barely got any. Don't get too hung up on methods. Experiment and remember that you are a person. Take inspiration and motivation from what other people are doing out there on the internet, but do not compare yourself to them and think that you are in any way, in any shape or form, inferior, because you aren't. Stay awesome. And that is a 10-minute language tag question. Now I get to tag a few other people to participate in this, and people I would really love to hear from are Catherine Wentworth from Women Learning Thai, and some men too. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from Mererid. I would love to hear from Lena Mutunono. So I'm tagging a few teachers here just to kind of shake it up. And Chris from the Actual Fluency podcast, do the language tag. And that's it.